Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. In a continent where countries have a history tainted with military coup, rebel groups and years of civil war, Liberia, Africa's oldest modern republic, is once again on the spotlight, and this time it has nothing to do with Ebola. Founded by freed United States U.S. slaves in 1847, the West African nation is on the verge of an historic election that will mark the first democratic transition in 73 years. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on the democratic process following the just concluded elections held in Liberia? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We'll take a report now, and Africa Today will continue. Welcome on board.
Hundreds of people lined up at polling booths in the Liberian capital, Monrovia, on Tuesday as voting began to choose a successor to Africa's first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Sirleaf won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for helping the country recover after a 14-year conflict when gangs of drugged child soldiers wearing ammunition belts marauded through the streets. Some had been waiting for hours before dawn to vote and brought small wooden chairs with them, forming orderly queues as vendors sold them soft drinks and palm wine.
After this election, I'm looking for a leader that is transparent, a leader that will seek the interests of the people, in that a leader that will improve the education system, the health sectors, not only for the health sectors, not only improving it with a lot of staff, but lot of good equipment that when people fall sick, they won't like to go out of the country to go seek medical attention.
We're just fighting for peace. We want peace right now. We want peaceful country. We want peaceful situation. We want things to go fine.
While preparations for the vote have been peaceful, a former rebel leader, Prince Johnson, is one of the 20 candidates, and an ex-wife of warlord Charles Taylor, who is now in a British jail, is the running mate of one of the favorites, former soccer player George Weah. Johnson Sirleaf beat Weah to win the election in 2005 after a period of transitional government following the civil war that ended 2 years earlier. Liberia is one of Africa's oldest states, founded by freed U.S. slaves in the 19th century. But its last democratic power transfer, defined as a peaceful handover at the end of a full term, was in 1943.
Partial results from Liberia's presidential election shows former football star George Weah with an early lead in 11 out of 15 counties, even though most votes have yet to be counted. While his main rival, incumbent Vice President Joseph Boakai, leads in one county, it would take more than 50% of the votes for outright victory to prevent a possible runoff in November. Now joining me in the studio on Africa Today, I have Nelson Ekujumi, a political analyst and social commentator in Nigeria. And on phone, I have Tiki Monakoso, a journalist, media consultant, and founding director of Afro Media Net, joining me from France. Good to have you both on the program. So let me begin with you now, Nelson. Liberia, we understand, has been through some tumultuous times. It faced a civil war twice, back to back, and also coming from suffering a devastating Ebola outbreak in the country recently. And now the country wants to, go into a democratic election once again. How crucial is this election in Liberia?
Well, thank you very much. I think the election is very crucial, and that has been testified to the turnout you saw, because from reports we got, the turnout was very, very impressive, and the election or the democratic process is crucial to the stability, to the peace and prosperity of Liberia, because if we have a smooth democratic process in place, a varied democratic system in place, it means that the transition from one government to the other will be one that will be devoid of bickering, that will, that would be devoid of those actions that led to the civil war. So one is very, very optimistic that the Liberian people have gotten it right this time, and one only hopes that they will build on it subsequently.
All right. Now, Tiki, from your experience or from your observation as a journalist, would you say that Liberians finally will get it right in terms of electing who should lead them in the next 6 years?
I was in Liberia in 1997 during the first election where President Johnson was a candidate and Charles Taylor won the election. I saw the country in the way that it was completely disturbed, completely destroyed. I visited Monrovia and many counties, and I saw how the destruction was. Of course, I think that at that time, many people would not like to be president of Liberia. And what is amazing is that it's only a woman who can see such a country that is destroyed and wanted to rebuild. I went back to Liberia later when President Johnson was in power, and I saw how she tried, because when people are speaking about Liberia, they cannot imagine from where the country come from to be where it is today. So I think for me, she works very hard, and what I really admire is the way that her attitude during this election, the way that she stayed completely impartial in the elections. She did not support her vice president. She did not support anybody. She just sent a message to people of Liberia to vote on their mind and to be democratic, to not vote according to the political party or according to the ethnic group, but to vote. I think this is one of something that is very interesting. The second thing is that in matter of security, I think is the main issue in Liberia. Madam Ellen Johnson succeeded to give a sort of stability, not only for Liberia, but also for the region. And I think that all the candidates that are now leading the elections, Bokai or Mr. Bokai or George Weah, are really, really conscious about the matters of stability. And I see that probably it's just my idea, my observation. If George Weah has the wife of Taylor, the ex-wife of Charles Taylor as a running mate, I think it's a matter of consensus to have a sort of stability in the country.
All right, talking about George Weah, knowing him to be a world-class football star, already reports say that he is on the lead. Now, what do you think could have been his selling point to the people for him to ensure that, he gets, a top lead in this election?
I think that, first of all, Weah is a former football, and a lot of young people admire him. He may have the youth on his side, and he's also young compared to the vice president. This is one of the higher points that he may have. Secondly, I think having the ex-wife of Charles Taylor as a running mate can be a sort of consensus for people who probably could be opposed to him or other candidates. And being a footballer, I think, is the idea of being like someone who can communicate, someone who can lead the country in peace. Football has never been something that it has never been a matter of conflict. It's just a matter of fair play. So I think that this is one of the strong point that he has. And in terms of management, of course, he has an experience as a senator, and also he may be probably have other people in his party that can lead and manage the country. It's not a problem. I think that he has a lot of chance to be the former president.
All right, let me quickly come to you now, Nelson. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, well, 12 years now. She has, taken over leadership in Liberia, and some would say or give her credit for ensuring stability in the region after it has come back from, 2 brutal civil wars and also an Ebola outbreak and all. How would you assess her leadership style? Do you think that she has left a big shoe to fill for whoever comes to take over?
Yes, definitely, because you and I know very well the acrimony, the bad blood that would have been generated by a civil war. But today we have a Liberia in which the ethnic differences, those primordial sentiments that are very, very prominent in most other African countries, are virtually, on the low scale in Liberia. That shows clearly that Mrs. Ellen Sirleaf Johnson's tenure as president in the last 12 years has been one in which she has cemented, the people across ethnic and religious divide. And, one of the greatest weapons for overcoming any challenge or challenges in life is when the people are united. Because like we say, when the people are united, a people united can never be defeated. So it means her tenure in power in the last 12 years has been one in which she has rallied the people of Liberia to confront their challenges. And for us, that is a big achievement, no matter whatever will have been her shortcomings. So she's leaving a big shoe that one hopes whoever is coming in will be able to, fit in perfectly and, try to surpass those achievements that she has made.
All right, let's quickly go on a quick break. You're watching Africa Today, and we've been looking at the democratic process following the just concluded election in Liberia. Stay with us for more in just a moment. The Liberian election is to see the end of the reign and successor to Africa's first elected female president and a Nobel Peace Laureate, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who assumed office in 2006. The 78-year-old Sirleaf is stepping down at the end of 2 terms, bounded by the Constitution. She has managed to galvanize the nation since power after her predecessor, Charles Taylor, was forced out of office by rebels in 2003, ending a long civil war. Well, now, Nelson, let's look at the issue of let's look at the issue of Charles Taylor now. Charles Taylor. Well, we know that he is no longer a part of this regime, so to speak. Yeah. But his wife, his ex-wife, happens to be a running mate for George Weah.
Yeah.
And from what our other resource person via phone, that's Tiki, she mentioned that perhaps one of the selling points for George Weah is because of the ex-wife of Charles Taylor being a part, of his team, and also being an ex-footballer. He can appeal to the people and all. But my particular concern is the ex-wife of Charles Taylor. Do you think that Charles Taylor might have an influence, so to speak, on what might be, what might happen in Liberia?
Well, it's not impossible that, his influence could still be on ground there in Liberia. But one thing we cannot shy away from is that a critical factor that must have helped the George Oponwe's candidacy is that he has this gender balance. George Weah is a man, and the vice presidential candidate
is a woman,
is a female. So that could also generate, female support as well as the male support. And don't forget also that Charles Weah and John Weah and George Oponwe, as a former footballer, it was like the Liberian ambassador extraordinary. He was the face of Liberia when he was playing football. So the youths who would form a large population of the voting, people here, have seen him as an idol. So those must have been the factors that must have endeared him to the voters. Because ordinarily looking at George Oponwe, as an analyst, I was like, this man doesn't have any economic, experience. He has never held a public office before.
But he was in the Senate.
Yes, the only thing we know he did very well, and which will count for him, is that he had an unblemished footballing career, and throughout those years, he played a big role, in promoting, patriotism in the Liberian national team, where he was funding the national team for international tournaments, he was paying their bonuses and what have you. So all those little inputs of his into the Liberian, nation must have galvanized the people to say, oh, this is a man that has invested in our country, and with him, we are likely, to get the dividends of democracy.
So you don't have any feelings that, Charles Taylor might, pull some strings?
Well, politics has a lot of interests at play. So many forces will be pulling front and back. But I suspect, or I hold the view, that no matter the influence that Charles Taylor might still be wielding in Liberia. I believe that there are some other contending forces that he will have, to square up against. And at the end of the day, like we always say, the forces that are in the majority or that have the upper hand, will prevail. And but we hope that whatever be those forces, we expect that it is the forces that will promote the interest of the Liberian people to meet their yearnings and aspirations, that will, reign supreme at the end of the day.
All right, Tiki, let's look at the expectations of the ordinary Liberian in Liberia. What is the general feel? What do they want from the new government?
I think they will, first of all, they would like to have the peace as they had it today. And after the peace, of course, they are thinking to have economic prosperity that everybody needs, because we have to keep in mind that 69% of Liberia still live under the line of poverty. And I think they will also like to have the gender balance that they start, because Ellen Sheriff Johnson inspired many women in Africa, in Liberia, and everywhere, not just being as head of state, but I think the movement helps women to understand that they can have a very high position. So we need to keep that in mind. And I think for the Liberian people, the first thing is the security and peace, and secondly, the economic prosperity. And after that, the education, health, everything that they can have in their life, like everybody.
But if I were to assess the leadership or assess Liberia under the leadership of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, how well do you think it was handled in terms of tackling corruption, tackling youth unemployment, security, and other things that underlisted in Liberia? How do you think it was handled under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? Do you think she performed credibly?
I think she did what somebody, a human being, can do in 12 years, because she did not have only corruption to deal with. She had to rebuild the whole country. And to rebuild such a big country and such a destroyed country, you cannot avoid having problem like corruption. I don't think that Liberia is the most corrupt country compared to other African countries or everywhere. But we should not put just the bad experience in front. Ellen Johnson did a lot of things. And I think we have to take it positively, because the country was completely destroyed. And what is sad is that when she started pulling the country a little bit up, you have this Ebola crisis who came and who at least took back the country, I can say, 5 years before. So I don't think that the corruption was something, we made it a very big issue in the media, but it was not the most important in Liberia. And today I think that any country you have corruption, it's practically impossible, even here in Europe. But the most important is to continue. She put the country in the way that somebody else can continue.
Okay, now Nelson, let's look at the possibility that George Weah might become the next president of Liberia. What would this mean, for those, who feel that you don't need to be a politician, even though George Weah, first of all, entered into the political race in 2005 before he finally gets, to 2017 to where he is assuming to get. If at all he gets the presidency, how much of a value do you think this would mean to the average Liberian and, of course, Africans who are also aspiring for the top job?
Well, what it tells you clearly is that for our democracy to thrive, for the people to be a part and parcel of democracy, since, we know very well that democracy without the people is not democracy but something else. It means as an individual, you have to invest in the lives of the people. Once you invest in the lives of the people, you can be rest assured whatever step you take as in aspiring for a public office, you will definitely have the people, behind at your back. They will be queuing behind you as payback. There's always payback for every action of an individual in life. So what this has shown to us clearly is that as an individual, the investment in human capital is very, very essential to building a political career. Whether you are in business, whether you are in religious, institution or what have you, what the message there is that once you have made your mark in your chosen field, in impacting on the people's lives. Even when you come into the political terrain, that will still, follow you. Don't forget, we had a similar experience in 1993 in Nigeria, where late Chief MQ Abiola was coming from the business, environment, and he aspired to be the president of Nigeria against Alhaji Tofa, also a political neophyte. But at the end of the day, the philanthropism of late Chief MQ Abiola was what galvanized majority of Nigerians to say, no, this man has invested in us, this is where we'll go. And that is also what is playing out with Liberia today. But we must be very careful. We must hearken to the call by the chairman of the Electoral Commission that we must be careful and await the Electoral Commission to announce official results in order to avoid crisis. Because before now, a lot of information had gone out there, proclaiming somebody to be a winner. We have seen such abnormalities, even here in Nigeria, where people just sit down in the confines of their room or wherever they are, and they churn out election results. Meanwhile, the only body authorized by law to announce the results is the Electoral Commission. So what we are just doing here this evening, is, I should say, we are making a projection into what could likely be the result. But for now, we have about 22.9% of the result that have been released so far, and Mr. George Oponwe is leading the incumbent vice president, in some of the counties that results have been out. So we just hope, like other election observers are calling on the Electoral Commission to ensure that there's timely release of the result. But they have also told us that they are very, very careful to prevent, mistakes, that they are more concerned with accuracy of results. Maybe they are being haunted by the Kenyan experience.
All right, Tiki, how would you assess the election so far in Liberia?
I think that they are doing well. First of all, the National Election Commission is very well organized, and they are taking time to have the fair result. It's not necessary, of course, we use in Africa to say this person will be the next president, but it's not necessary to say that, because we'll have the final result, and the final result will be the one that everybody should respect. So even whatever is the people in mind today, or all the type of information that are followed somewhere, it's just for the Liberian to vote, and for the Liberia National Election Commission to give the official figures and the official results. So, of course, we are doing our comment, seeing that maybe George Weah, because he's young, because he have a female mate to running with him. It's some positive point, but that does not mean that Joe Bokai could not continue to lead the country. He has the experience since 2006. So I think maybe he will do something better as the president, because he has been the vice president. And why not? In another point, I think that dealing an African country need a lot of wisdom. Not necessarily being the best mathematician or the best economist.
All right, Tiki, we have to leave it there for now because of time factor. I'd like to thank you very much, Tiki Monacoso, journalist and media consultant, joining me all the way from France for your thoughts exactly on what the ongoings in Liberia. Thanks a lot. And as well, Nelson Ekujumi, a friend of the house, a political analyst.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your contributions as well on the program.
Thank you.
So unlike Rwanda, Congo and Burundi, Liberia is poised to hand power to one democratically elected president to another, although the nation remains plagued by corruption and is still recovering from the Ebola crisis of 2014 and 2015. To consolidate on the present and improve on the future, Liberia's next president will need an inclusive, sustainable national development agenda that cuts through the ethnic background, social barrier and political affiliation. And that is our package for today, but don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG, and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. To the next one, I am Esther Mokwariola, and always remember, change starts with you.
let me announce the presence in our midst of His Excellency Mr. Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa. Mr. Zuma is here with his amiable wife, Bongi Ngema Zuma. Amidst us is His Excellency, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Our Excellency Owele Rochas,